So let's talk a little bit more about the direct Trump and Epstein connections. Interesting moment on Don Lemon's podcast. He had on Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark, and asked him directly, hey, do you think that Trump, during his first administration, actually had your brother killed? Let's take a listen to that.
When you saw that interview with them, I think there was a couple of interviews. The one thing with Maria Bartiromo, where they sat down, and I mean, they were glum, and they're saying, there's nothing there. I would be honest with you, there's nothing there. After years and years of pushing, and also calling this somehow a Democrat, according to them, conspiracy theory, and that somehow the Democrats were involved in your brother's death.
I don't think the Democrats, look at it this way. Bill Barr, when he came out with that ridiculous statement, he was the Attorney General. You know, who did he, look, if Jeffrey was murdered, which I believe he was, somebody did it. So the people who are coming out with these ridiculous statements, I think, are covering up for somebody, right? So who are they covering up for? You know, Bill Barr worked for the President of the United States. Kash Patel works for the President of the United States. Pam Bondi works for the President of the United States. Maybe someone should ask him what he knows.
Who do you think they're covering up for?
Who do they all work for?
They all work for Donald Trump.
Well, like I said in another interview, I wouldn't be surprised.
You wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump was behind your brother's death? Are you saying that Donald Trump had your brother murdered, do you believe?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying if that's what it was, I wouldn't be surprised. We know that Jeffrey had dirt on Donald Trump. We know that. That's a fact. Because he said in 2016 with the election that if he said what he knew, they'd have to cancel the election. He didn't tell me what he knew, but that's what he said. And I've been public about that before. That shouldn't come as a shock.
Dirt like what? Dirt about what?
Of course, Steve Bannon said that the only person he feared for Donald Trump's sake was Jeffrey Epstein. Why? What do you think? Jeffrey was going to beat him up? No, it's because of what Jeffrey knew.
And what did Jeffrey know?
Well, I don't know. He didn't tell me what he knew, but he said if he said what he knew, they'd have to cancel the election.
So very interesting comments there, Saagar. What do you make
Mark
of that?
is an interesting figure. So Mark, actually, some background, if people want to listen to my interview with Tucker. Tucker in 2019 was like, yeah, you know, maybe he killed himself, you know, we'll see, whatever. But he said that Mark Epstein called him and he was like, I'm telling you 100% he did not kill himself, you know, based on everything that I know about this. And it began actually a years-long relationship between Mark and Tucker, basically about this issue of whether he killed himself or not, which was an exploration about the intelligence connections, etc. So Mark is not a partisan Democratic figure. I just want people to lay that out and know it at the beginning. I mean, in a way, he's like advocating for his dead brother, even though he was, you know, a heinous individual, but whatever. The point is that it's an entree point to which you have to ask the question, why? Who is covering this stuff up and for what purpose? And I'll be honest, you know, for me, I always thought the Trump thing was tenuous. And Tucker kind of put it to me, he's like, well, you know, wouldn't the Biden administration release it? No, that's like a compelling point. And then the second part is like, oh, it's just not really who Trump is. And, you know, for all of his sexual proclivities, and, you know, basically you can read it and all for yourself from Stormy Daniels. It's just like, it seems like pretty standard, like horny old man behavior. But then this, you know, the way this is now being handled, combined with the totality of the reaction previously, that really makes me start to be like, man, what's going on here? And I don't know, is it Trump himself? Is it about his own enabling him? Let's be honest, he hung out with him. He was a Mar-a-Lago friend.
Yeah.
There's pictures of them all being together. So at this point, I almost have no choice but to ask, be like, look, maybe there really is something there. And I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. It's not a conspiracy theory. There's like, in the same way that we look past, let's look at the evidence about the way he said to Ghislaine, I wish her well, right? About the way that case was handled, in which they basically localized the entire prosecution to just Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein to make sure it didn't implicate anybody else. He did die under his watch. All of these people do work for Donald Trump. Obviously, the, you know, acts of faith asked to be proclaimed here from Kash Patel, Bondi, and others come from Trump himself, I would assume. And then there's his public record now in the camera.
Right.
It's sketchy. I don't know another way to say it.
And you have this choice of numerous Epstein-linked figures
Right.
for his first and second administration, whether it's Bill Barr, whose dad gives Epstein Epstein his first job at a private school, even though
His very first job.
Right.
Yeah, who
Even
has
though-
never had a college degree, at Dalton School. Bill Barr's father hires him, where he gets introduced to whom? To Bear Stearns, where he then goes, it's like, man, you're sending me down the rabbit hole. But
I know.
this is important
No college
stuff.
degree.
People need to know.
And I don't know if people know.
It was to teach math.
Dalton
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
a highly elite.
Yes.
It's like, the pinnacle of like elite private schools. So he gets plucked with no college degree to go teach there, then parlays that into somehow becoming this financier, managing billions of dollars. Oh, who are your clients? We don't know. Don't know. Outside of Les Wexner. That's the only one we really know.
Yes.
But we're told this is, so lucrative and he's so extraordinary at it that, he becomes so wealthy that he has actually sort of gifted to him, actually from Les Wexner,
Literally
the
gifted.
largest private residence in Manhattan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Manhattan, but
Like
there's a lot of wealthy
$70 million
people there.
Townhouse. It's crazy.
Yes,
Yeah, it's insane.
on the Upper East Side,
Yeah.
absolutely. Didn't you tell me he's neighbors with Howard Lutnick?
Yes, he was also Howard. Howard Lutnick's like, just so people know. By the way, Howard recently purchased a $1,200 bottle of tequila and bragged about it online. If you're wondering, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, so I mean, you have that. You've got Alex Acosta, who is the person who gave Epstein that sweetheart deal, which really buried all of this evidence. I mean, that was critical. And, Alan Dershowitz was his lawyer in all of that and has continued to receive legal fees from Jeffrey Epstein over time. Here you've got Pam Bondi, who also was Florida, who also, there's linkages there as well. And then you consider Trump and his longtime relationship and the things that we know about that. And then there he is acting guilty as fucking covering the thing up. Yeah, you have to ask some questions about that. Michael Wolff, a journalist who did hours of interviews actually with Jeffrey Epstein, talked about how a bunch of these linkages were just basically hiding in plain sight with regard to Donald Trump. Let's take a listen to a little bit of that.
Donald Trump has gotten away with literally everything. And it turns out to be one of his greatest gifts. And somehow, again, hiding in plain sight, this long relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. And Trump has just waved it away, swept it under the rug, ignored it, and gotten away with it. Once when I was, this was in Mar-a-Lago, I went to have a sit down with him. And his aides just asked me, a rough outline of what I wanted to talk about. And I had a lot of subjects, but I also said Epstein, and they said, if you ask about that, he'll just stop the interview and you won't get anything. So
interesting there. He says, Epstein, other things, fine. Epstein off limits. And you know how that interview shaping works in advance. They say, okay, well, yeah, you can ask if you want, but that's just going to be the end of it.
Do you know what the key is to do that? Is to ask it at the end.
The very last
question. If anybody wants to know a nice strategy, that's what I did. Before I went into the Oval once, Sarah Sanders was like, hey, just don't ask about this whole E. Jean Carroll thing. And we were like, for sure. And then, of course, when we were done, we were like, hey, by the way, what do you think about this whole... And of course, we got this iconic answer, which she ended up using in her own defamation lawsuit, citing it multiple times, that answer. So, yes, that's the strategy about what you're supposed to do.
And Wolff has other things that he's said as well, that Epstein told him that they were besties for, over a decade. Right. And certainly they were, closely linked for quite a while in the early 90s and in the 90s in general. He also has talked about, photos with girls of uncertain age and a stain on Trump's pants and girls pointing and laughing at him. That's what his claim is in terms of things that exist out there. So another interesting data point here, put C3 up on the screen. Apparently, Trump held some talks on a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell, which fits with the response when he got asked about her, when she was on trial. Hey, I wish her well. And fits with a very persistent pattern of getting quite squirrely when asked about the Epstein Files and the release of the Epstein Files. Every time he got asked about it would be like, yeah, well, maybe, no, actually, you got to worry about people's privacy there. So, for people who, I guess, wanted to hear that there would be a release, they just listened to the figures around Trump, or they listened to that first, like, yeah, sure, before the, well, I don't know, I'm not so sure. The other one's yes, but not so much on Epstein. Let's put this next one up on the screen here. This is just another indication of like the things that were said about this case before we got the memo that was just like, case closed, nothing to see here. Prince Andrew, by the way, and everybody else, you're all let off the hook. Don't worry about it. You're good to go. Completely innocent. FBI employees had received a directive to begin working uninterrupted on the Epstein records. Under pressure from Patel, hundreds of FBI employees, including special agents from the DC, New York field office, have been working furiously to meet Pam Bondi's demands. They've been holed up in offices at the Bureau's sprawling Central Records Complex in Winchester, Virginia, houses 2 billion pages of physical FBI records, an older building a few miles away. They've been working alongside analysts tasked with processing FOIA requests at the department. So whatever happened with those hundreds of FBI employees, like what were they doing there? What records were they looking at? What are we talking about here for it all to be just case closed with a single page memo that, supposedly there's nothing going on and there's nothing to learn, and we have definitively decided that he definitely killed himself.
Yes, that's right. I mean, look, I think it's all just totally crazy. And you flagged this to me, this piece by Chris Hedges. Let's put C5, please, up on the screen. I mean, really what Chris gets into is not only the list of all of the figures, including Trump himself, that are all tied up within this, but listen, I mean, when looking back also at the fact, at this point, we have to acknowledge, we have Epstein who dies under Trump. We have all of these allegations and weird and sketchy things that happen, in terms of Trump's answer that specifically happened here around the Epstein scandal. Mm-hmm. He cites a lawsuit, which I actually was not aware about these Epsteinian orgies and weird things, which, allegedly implicate Trump. I had no idea about this lawsuit.
I didn't know about this either.
Yeah.
This was what surprised me. So let me just read this section to get the details, very specifically correct here. The Miami Herald investigative reporter Julie K. Brown, whose dogged reporting was largely responsible for reopening the federal investigation into Epstein and Maxwell, documents in her book, Perversion of Justice, The Jeffrey Epstein Story. As Brown writes, in 2016, an anonymous woman using the pseudonym Kate Johnson filed a civil complaint in a federal court in California, alleging she was raped by Trump and Epstein when she was 13 over a 4-month period from June to September 94. I loudly pleaded with Trump to stop, she said in the lawsuit about being raped. Trump responded to my pleas by violently striking me in the face with his open hand and screaming he could do whatever he wanted. Now, basically, that lawsuit goes away. Mm-hmm. Is it because there's no there, or is it
very
because,
possible? By the way.
Maybe,
yeah, it's possible.
Or
I
is
was
it
not aware of
because,
this.
what Hedges alleges here is more likely is that Trump was able to quash the lawsuit by buying her silence, is what he says, and she has since disappeared. So, again, maybe it went away because there was no there, or maybe he was able to use his wealth to make it go away. But this all just speaks to the fact that these entanglements, I mean, this was reported long ago. Mm-hmm. And these entanglements, this was all out. This is not conspiracy. This is a thing that happened. And we have the pictures together. We have the flight logs actually came out during Ghislaine Maxwell's trial. We covered at the time the way that the federal government case that was pursued against Ghislaine Maxwell, they called it like a thin case or something like that.
It was very tailored.
It was meant to be very narrow. Right. So it just focused on the things that they felt really confident they could prove, but meant that anyone else who may be implicated, there was not going to be discovery around that. There was not going to be any sort of opening the books of which other powerful people were ultimately involved there. And then you also get the news, oh, hey, Trump was actually thinking about pardoning her because he was kind of worried about what she might say about him. So I think there are real justified non-conspiratorial reasons to look at this whole chain of events and have some real questions about how exactly Trump was implicated and involved here. Was he in the Epstein Files? I mean, there's no doubt about that. We know that. He's in the flight log. Mm-hmm. So I guess it depends on your definition of the Epstein Files. But, the extent or the nature, that I think is an open question, but very reasonable one to ask.
Yeah, and that's just my last point on the Epstein Files. And I know we've talked a lot about it, and I do understand maybe fatigue and others, but this is important. There is no such thing as a ledger that's just client supports Israel now because we blackmailed. That's not how this stuff works. What works is the totality of documentation, flight logs, IRS records, state filings, LLCs, pass-through entities through which the money flowed in and to where it flowed out. Now, all the public evidence that we have right now from the nonprofit and apparatus at Deutsche Bank and others shows a lot of money coming in from the world's billionaires for purposes completely unknown to us, going out to Eastern European sex trafficking rings, paying off a whole bunch of other people, and being used for purposes that continue to remain unknown, very likely for intelligence purposes that implicate multiple billionaires, very famous people, prime ministers of Israel, Pritzker, the Pritzker family, the governor right now in Illinois. All of these people are implicated, and they're using it specifically to fund a variety of different things. But that is not an Epstein Files. That's financial records that exist right now. The IRS, if anybody could pull our documentation right now and look at everything that we filed ever as a business to show exactly the money coming in, the money going out. The government has that. But people narrowly focus and they make bombastic claims about the black book or whatever. It's like, that's not, I mean, yes, I want that released too, but my point is that there's an entire vast apparatus that he was like sitting as the top of, but there's a whole lot of stuff other there. So let's also not get over our skis and then be satisfied if it's like, oh, they released the black book. It's like, no, it goes so much deeper than that. The question is, why did Leon Black, a man worth $9 billion, pay $170 million for public tax advice from Jeffrey Epstein? That's the question I want to know.
Yeah.
And that's a much bigger question than any so-called client list. Where did that money go? For what reason? And that's when you really start to, I'm quoting The Wire. When you start to follow the money, you don't know where the fuck it's going to take you.
Yeah.
So that's what I encourage people to do.
How did he make his money?
Yeah, I mean,
What happened to all the videos,
Yes.
video recordings that we know exist from both his Manhattan residence and the island? Like, there are some really big unanswered questions that remain, and one edited video with a portion missing, I don't think is going to put to bed
I agree.
those persistent questions.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.